Hello, everyone. I'm Joseph Giarraputo, the publisher and editorial director of Global Finance. I want to thank you all for joining us at this year's Kuwait Banking and Finance Roundtable. We're honored and delighted to have present His Excellence Governor Mohammad Al-Hashel of the Central Bank of Kuwait. The governor is going to be joined by the leaders of the following 6 banks in Kuwait: Isam Al-Sager, Group CEO of NBK; Abdulwahab Al-Rushood, Acting Group CEO of Kuwait Finance House; Adel Al-Majed, CEO of Boubyan Bank; Khalil, CEO of Markaz; Jehad Al-Humaidhi, Acting CEO Ali United Bank; and Richani, CEO of Al-Ahli Bank, Kuwait. All right, here's how we will proceed. I'll read each of the agenda questions, and then call on one of you who has indicated a particular interest in the subject at hand. Following the first person's comments, the floor is open for others to join in. If you wish to speak on a topic, please indicate so in the chat function or put your hand up and I'll try to recognize you. We want to give everyone an opportunity to participate in each question, so we've allocated about 15 minutes for each topic. We ask you to keep this in mind as you're speaking. All right? On all questions, if the governor would like to go first, that's his option. So here we go. A year after the emergence of the pandemic, Kuwait is still experiencing partial lockdowns, travel bans, and mandatory institutional quarantining. Vaccines are becoming available, but have not yet reached a large percentage of the population. How has pandemic impacted Kuwait's economy and banks? When do you anticipate recovery to take place in earnest? Which sectors of the economy will be permanently advantaged or damaged? Governor, if you'd like to go first, you may. Otherwise, I'm going to ask Mr. Al-Majed to pick up.
Undoubtedly, 2020 was exceptional by all means. It's not like any other year for the whole world and for Kuwait as well. At all fronts, health-wise, economically, financially, services, all fronts were impacted by this crisis. Economically, we expect a decline and contraction in the GDP, both oil and non-oil sector. Third quarter data shows that there will be a decline of around 11.5%. Which was slightly better than the second quarter contraction of 13.4% year on year. This was driven both by oil and non-oil sectors. Fiscal front was also facing challenges by the hit in oil prices. We've seen a sharp decline in oil prices, which impacted revenues. And given the heavy reliance on oil revenues for the fiscal front, therefore the budget was impacted negatively. Also, production was cut, and that led to overall decline in total oil revenues. Banking sector, fortunately, was resilient and sound enough to absorb the shock, even though we're not out of the wood yet. Nonetheless, our efforts with the banking sector over the past decade, I think, have paid off during this crisis. And the banking sector, Kuwaiti banks specifically, entered the crisis from a position of strength. And this was published recently when we studied and analyzed the banking sector financials for the past year. It showed very healthy capital adequacy, very strong asset quality, good profitability, even though the business environment and operational environment was impacted negatively by the lockdowns, both full and partial. Nonetheless, Kuwaiti banking sector remained sound, as I said, and continued to perform its vital role in the economy. So We're not out of the wood yet, but we expect the banking sector and financial stability to remain sound and strong and healthy, and hopefully overcome this crisis very soon.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Al-Majed, would you like to pick up?
I'm saying the banks thought they were prepared for digitization and how to work from the banks through the customer, but we never, I think, looked at this scenario, the scenario of being shut from staff and premises. We were preparing ourselves, or we were looking at it from digital point of view. Logistics, it was a shock at the first days. We were not prepared, I think, and I can speak for all over the banks, for our staff to work from home. That was a big challenge. We thought also we were advanced in digital. We looked at it from retail point of view, but also banks were not prepared from corporate when it was involved moving cash. Staff, we never looked at staff from staff point of behavior, especially when we talk about a pandemic. We had a lot of resistance from staff also. To be fair, the people who were involved in branch operations and all letter of credits and back office rose to the occasion, but we still faced some staff that were like so scared to work. Business that were affected all over. I think if I had, I brought some numbers from KNET. The business went like in some cases 90%, especially when full lockdown came. But what's good is that after the lockdown, most businesses went back to normal. The peculiar one was the government. You know, the government. I think also to have to praise the government. Reacted very, very quickly, and like for instance, cash. All the government institutions and refused to accept cash in all transactions. That gave KNET, or with the payment gateway, a big jump. So right now, if you look at 1 year on year, most of the transactions went back to normal. Payment gateway, which is triggered by mostly government, is higher by far than before pandemics. One of the examples that we never thought of is what availability of laptops in Kuwait. Most of the banks wanted, especially with call centers, to start working from home. We had a shortage, and actually most of the banks has to try to allocate laptops even from the retail market, from a shop here or a shop there. So right now, after the 1 year, I think banks are coming back to normal. We still are not, I agree with the governor, we're still not out of the woods yet. But operation-wise, we're settled. I think this was a good learning for us. We still have some issues to tackle. But right now, I think the good thing about, if we have a bright thing about the COVID, that the banks right now, all over the banks, are well prepared for such a scenario in the future. I hope that it doesn't repeat itself. But we are. What else? I think just one point is a big debate right now is about efficiency of staff. And if we are right now working at 50% staff at office, and in some cases 30%, We're wondering whether the efficiency of the staff that were managing the bank with was excess or whether it was well utilized. That's from my point.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. This is an important topic, and I think we'll devote a few more minutes to it. Does anyone want to talk about it? Anyone else? Ali?
Very much, Joseph. I mean, from our point of view, the lockdown and measures taken were prioritizing safety, and naturally so, and thanks God so, but has led to a loss of productivity with serious, business and economic implications. I mean, foremost, we see Kuwait business environment was looking a little bit more onward. The society has adapted to basically local, basically turning inward, mainly in leisure, hospitality, education, and healthcare. The impact basically from COVID has been substantial, but I would say much better than what we expected at Markaz. Earnings of listed companies were down approximately 60% year on year, 20 versus 2019, with banks down by 50%. The biggest losers were real estate due to collection and, in effect, some pressure on expatriate population, and financial services. Telecom fared reasonably well. I would like to stress here that the Kuwait stimulus was lower in the region, standing at about 1.2% of GDP compared with Saudi Arabia of 6.3%, which was very good for the government balance sheet, but not as positive basically for the private businesses. In general, we saw basically developed markets were very aggressive on the stimulus, like the US at 25% of GDP as of today, and the emerging market took the opportunity basically to embrace reforms. We were kind of slow on the reforms. Just to sum it up, leading to recovery within your question, we feel that there is a tailwind, basically positive tailwind on the recovery from banks, retail with online shopping, Kuwait-centric hospitality and leisure, and mainly centered around quality of life, education, healthcare, technology, and enablers, and headwinds for real estate, both commercial and residential, general contracting, and outbound hospitality and business hotels. But I would like to add one more statement, basically. Unlike 2008, the banks this time played a very, very supportive role and continued to provide liquidity to most sectors, and which basically has been a great positive help during this crisis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Humaidhi, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, and in addition to what my colleague said, is that there are two aspects here. There's the aspect of the banking sector themselves, and then there's the aspect of the businesses, which are interrelated. The banking sector, even though our profitability shows a lot less than the years before, but I think it showed a very good resilience, as the governor has stated. And this is based on a lot of measures that have been taken not only in 2020, but previously, and how we have built up our reserves and our provisions from before. So there's a lot of strength in the banking sector, but also from the other side, from the businesses. You can see businesses that have actually excelled in their business because of the pandemic, and mainly those that are involved in online shopping and fintechs. These are the ones that did not get as much affected as the other sectors did. Hospitality, of course, is one of the biggest sectors in Kuwait and in the world that has been affected by this pandemic. One other thing also that Adel Majed talked about, which is staff working from home. Also, this was something new. All banks have prepared for business continuity, but this was not a scenario we worked on before. It's a new scenario that we have not envisaged. So therefore, at the beginning, as Adel stated, this was a challenge for all banks. However, we all got through this, and we managed to serve our customers during the full lockdown and subsequently, even when we were partially working. The only point I may disagree with Adel is the point whether 50% is in excess. When we have 50% today working from office, the other 50% are working from home. So they complement each other. And we found that working from home is as efficient as working from the office, except in a few functions around the bank that require physical presence. Otherwise, even our call center was able to work from home. So it is a new experience for the whole world, but in Kuwait and in the banking sector in specific. But we learned along the way, and I think as Adel and as the other colleagues have stated, is that we are now prepared for hopefully not another round, but I mean we are now able, even now with this partial lockdown, and with the reduction of the staffing requirements in the office, we've been able to serve our customers 100%. So there are lessons that we learned and that we have gotten over this period.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next question. In its relatively short history, digital banking has been transformative. During the pandemic, digital banking reached new watersheds as people were forced to conduct personal and professional banking activities from phones, tablets, and computers. What has been the experience in Kuwait? How have banks performed? And what are the challenges facing Kuwaiti digital banking? George Richani, please begin.
Yeah, well, to answer this question, you have to really understand a few things. Even before the COVID started, Kuwait has had high uptake potential for digitization. Why? Because of two things or three things. One is the Kuwait demographics. 62% of the population in Kuwait is below 30 years. If you look at the millennials, the age between 23 and 38 years of age, 25%, they represent around 25% of the population. Even Generation Z is 30% of the population. That's the age between 7 and 22. So this was helping basically and supportive even before the COVID for people to really use digitization. In fact, if you look at some numbers of digitization, 97% internet penetration is in Kuwait. Is one of the highest in the world. 75% of the people on the internet use smartphones to access the internet. 7 million people use smartphones basically. That's 170% penetration, i.e., for each one person they have 1.7 smart mobile machines. The social media, if you talk about the social media, 55% or about are very active on social media in Kuwait. So those are very, very important factors that help basically digitization. The regulation also helped. The central bank, of course, in late 2018, issued new instructions regulating electronic payments. So basically, there are many, many, many factors. Aggregators, Kuwaiti aggregators, they have been basically a very important GCC-wide success. Online food ordering platforms like Talabat and Carriage. If you look at payment aggregators like MyFatura, Tap, and One Global, they are gaining market share in the region and territories like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. The numbers are very impressive. Now, this is before the COVID even. During the COVID, Kuwait saw a very significant uptake in mobile and internet banking, especially day-to-day transactions. We have seen adoptions by consumers almost fivefold. E-commerce spend has increased, multiplied. First-time users and repeat users. Electronic payments have also thrived. Card and contactless, displacing cash. Merchants were forced basically and the major retailers have had no choice, but to focus on online to replace dwindling face-to-face or in-store businesses. I'll give you an example. For example, in Al-Ahli Bank of Kuwait, we saw in 2020 versus 2019, 73% increase in online domestic transactions. We have seen a 30% increase in new mobile banking. 35% increase in online transfers. You'll be surprised. We've seen 800% growth from a low base, yes, but a growth in ABK Pay services, which offers customers, for example, the ability to request payments using WhatsApp and SMS. Even during 2020, we did not stop. For example, Al-Ahli Bank launched tokenization payment services where customers could really use their debit or credit or prepaid cards through smart devices like Samsung, Fitbit, Garmin Pay wallet to pay at point of sales. So I expect overall, if I have to sum it up, digitalization levels achieved during the pandemic will stay with us and will even basically increase. They say, for example, habits die hard, and over a year, even the old generation were forced to use basically digitization. Some early research now indicate that 40% of consumers basically will continue to increase basically the use of digitization. So I'm very positive. Kuwait was ready before the COVID. The regulations are helping, definitely. The central bank is paving the way, is pushing in this direction. The digital vertical in banking is being pushed by the central bank. The banks know that they move. Demographics are in the right place, and digitization usage is in the right place as well to move ahead.
Okay.
So I'm very positive.
All right, thank you. Governor, digitization has been a hot button for the central bank. Do you want to comment on this question too?
Yes, thank you, Joseph. I think, and I thank my colleagues as well for their contribution. I think this is a very important and critical topic, and it's an equation that has to balance. On one side, you want advanced, top quality, convenient, fast services. On the other side, you want safe and secure services. We encourage our banking community and financial sector to provide such products and services that combine these two categories or values: safety from one side and convenience and high quality on the other side. I think we should take our efforts to a new level. Previously, technology was a mere support function. This is not anymore the case. It became at the heart of everything. And I think we should take our products and services to a new digital level. What's required is not only automation of things or electronic payments or simple automation of services. I think it's much more than that. And the banking community, given their human capital and technology and IT infrastructure, I think they have the capacity to contribute to the society, to their own resources, as well as the fintech community in Kuwait and the SMEs and the digital companies, the small companies that are trying to provide innovative products and services to the community. Therefore, we are collaborating and encouraging strongly our banking sector to play a vital role in supporting those companies. We are providing also a supportive environment in our regulatory sandbox, where we provide a safe testing environment in order to ensure whatever service provided to the community is, as I said, top quality, added as well as safe at the same time. So investment is required in the future in this area, from us at our level, at the regulator level, at the banking community as well, and the private sector.
Okay, all right, thank you. Technology or digital banking came up in all of the pre-interviews I had with this group. Does anyone else want to comment on digital banking at this sector?
Yeah, I just want to elaborate just in one point. As for KFH, I think our strategy was to manage the crisis by utilizing digital tools to facilitate customer service and internal operations. I can say that the pandemic was a real test of our digital transformation strategy. During the crisis, we maintained our performance and provided quality mobile banking services without interruption throughout the pandemic period, while taking care of health and safety of our employees as well and customers. Proudly to say that in 2020, transactions completed by customers online or through the mobile app hit 140 million transactions, in a growth of 18% compared to last year. And with the support of our central bank, providing the framework and approval, and KFH, we launched a digital onboarding services, opening bank account online. That will take minutes to open a line for customers, and also without visiting any branches. In terms of investing in the fintech, I'd like to mention that here around KFH as well, through KFH Capital, we are already investing in 2 fintech funds, one in the Silicon Valley, and the other one is in the Middle East. So in terms of the technology and the digitalization strategy that we have been following here in KFH, based on the direction of the central bank and also the board of directors, we are taking the right track, and we are hoping to achieve all satisfaction for our clients and customers. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On this digital banking question, anyone else want to contribute? Put your hand up if you wish. Okay, George.
I mean, there are challenges, of course, as the governor has mentioned. Of course, internally, I mean, banks should really work on their talent. Like there is a shortage in software architects, data scientists, designers, etc. Also, operating models need to be more agile. Banks, I'm sure most of the banks in Kuwait are working on digitization and automation of their processes, like robotic process automation. But very important, again, if I'm repeating the same point, is technology and operational resilience through management of cybersecurity and fraud risk is very critical. In that regard, to prove very, very timely, raise the awareness of the public in this regard.
Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next question. In the GCC and Kuwait, the pandemic has been a grand disruptor. Disruption often leads to consolidation within sectors, perhaps at the country and regional level. Do you see societal support for consolidation of the Kuwaiti and GCC banking sector? Governor, would you like to comment on this?
Well, I'm not sure if this is a matter of societal support, rather business decision. Indeed, such a decision, or society, if we take the society side, what they care about is, as I said, that they receive top quality, fast, convenient, cheap, safe services. If consolidation will lead to that, I think that's what society cares about. But if we take the business side, the shareholders, the regulators, there it's more of a technical decision. If that consolidation will lead to such a new institution, new synergies, qualities, resources, both human and IT, I think in that case, the decision is to support such a consolidation. So we have to think very clearly and thoroughly about such decisions. If it will lead to such a new product, a new entity that can provide better services to the community, I think in that situation, a consolidation is warranted. And from our perspective as a regulator, given that we're not out of the woods yet, as I said, I think it is very critical that we think very deeply about the situation, evaluate pros and cons, ensure that we understand both the acquirer and the acquired companies in order to decide whether, as I said, the bottom line that the new entity can survive the crisis, better serve the community, ensure financial stability, lead to high quality services, and of course, further strengthen the competition rather than reducing the competition in the banking sector. So bottom line is the community, is the society, is the human being that we provide service to. If we can provide better services by the new entity, then this is a good decision. If that new entity will lead to poor services or will disrupt the financial stability or lead to any instability at the financial or monetary side, I think that decision is not warranted and must be thought carefully.
All right, thank you. Mr. Al-Sager, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Joseph. I would say that during COVID-19, it has led to extreme stability in markets as it disrupted the global business trends and reshaped many industries. This disruption has also affected banking sector across various geographies and is consequently will remain felt in the future as recovery takes place gradually. The post-COVID world will offer opportunities for cross-border merger and acquisition as various financial institutions will face challenges to remain operational while others strive to become larger and more diversified to withstand regional and global competition. A cross-border consolidation can also create a lot of synergies, allowing for cross-selling in different markets, cost-saving, transfer of knowledge, technologies, and talent. I would say also higher compliance costs associated with increased requirement, also adding to the cost of banks, compounding pressure on small and medium-sized leading to consolidation. It is estimated that more than 20 Gulf financial institutions with total assets exceeding $1 trillion were in merger talks in 2020. Banks in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar are merging to create largest financial institutions to support the transformation efforts that are underway in their relevant economies. To that point, Kuwaiti banks need to be well prepared and positioned to leverage any emerging opportunities and remain competitive on regional fronts as we see more and more large banks emerging, including recent M&A trends in the GCC countries like Saudi Arabia and Emirates.
Okay, thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to comment? Please put your hand up if you do. Abdulwahab, go ahead.
Yeah, I think nobody would deny the benefits of the consolidation among the banks. So I'd like to add to Mr. Isam's point that if you look into the GCC, the top 10 banks now are becoming from the merger or from the acquisition. If you look at the FAB, and after the as an example, after the acquisition, they became like a second largest bank in the GCC with an assets of $230 billion. considering currently the NCB and Samba Financial Group in Saudi Arabia, if the acquisition and the merger has completed, they'll become number 3 in terms of assets. Therefore, we believe that the benefit and the efficiency on the rate of return and on shareholders' equities is, I think, one of the major benefits from the consolidations among the GCC banks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else on consolidation? George?
Mr.
Governor, go ahead.
Your Excellency, the Governor. Go ahead.
After George, I will take the floor. After George, please, George.
Okay. Thank you, Your Excellency. Well, theoretically speaking, I mean, the core drivers of consolidation between banks are maybe many, but the most important ones are basically achieving bigger banks with increased economies of scale, especially in the same sectors, in order, for example, to fund mega government projects. That's one reason. The other is the possibility of to increase economies of scope, and that's across sectors, to provide wider spectrum of products, for example. Or when banks are under earning pressure, I mean, there is a tendency for banks usually to come together. Or when you have an overbanked population, then I mean, it makes sense basically to merge and to consolidate. While consolidation creates efficiency in general, the integration and the cultural challenges that consolidation faces cannot be ignored at all. And if you talk about society, for society, I mean, one should strike really a balance between having lots of choices for the clients and product variety versus lower cost. You don't want to create like big, huge institutions where there will be basically monopoly of prices. I mean, going forward, the way I see in Kuwait or in the GCC, banks taking steps in 2 directions. The first direction is to acquiring or actively partnering with technology and digital companies like fintechs and payment startups. And the second is adding capabilities to the bank through, for example, new segments or products offerings, for example, trade finance with partnerships, etc. But definitely Kuwait is behind the GCC, and it's a thing that we need to really look at possibly and wait what will happen.
Okay. Governor, you wanted to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to emphasize on the point that which George alluded to, that theoretically, hypothetically speaking, yes, consolidation in many cases is a good thing, but we shouldn't ignore the challenges, the underlying fundamentals of this very critical process. As I said, bottom line is operational efficiency. If A plus B will create a new entity C that is better than the summation of A and B, then this is a good decision. If it's a mere addition of A and B, or create an institution that's worse than A and B separately from all types of angles and perspectives, for instance, maybe it's good for shareholders, but bad for the society or for competition or productivity, then this is not a good choice. So if we can enhance financial stability, if we can create better operational efficiency, if we protect consumers further by creating this institution, if we strengthen competition and the new large institution would provide better services to the community, then this is a good decision. So many elements and parameters come into play and must be considered very carefully. And let's remind ourselves of the waves that consolidation went through over the past couple of decades. If you remember, during or immediately after the 2008 global crisis, the momentum and sentiment was going for more specialization and spin-off and smaller, more specialized banks rather than too big to fail. If you remember that notion, too big to fail, and we're going to more specialized, focused banks that are agile, easy to manage, also for regulators and central banks, also easier to restore or ensure the stability or protect the society from any collapse of those banks. Whereas too big to fail, large banks were creating a problem, the world, and it was more towards going for more specialized, smaller banks. Now it's coming back, given the pandemic, given the need for enhanced profitability after the pressure on the business environment and profitability, given the need for digitalization and more efficiency, so consolidation might come back into play. So we have to be careful. We shouldn't just follow the titles and the theory, but rather focus on the practical benefits to the all stakeholders in the society and the economy.
All right, thank you, Governor. Would anyone else like to comment on this consolidation question? Okay, we'll move on then. Around the world, environmental, social, and governance considerations have taken on new prominence during the pandemic. What has happened in Kuwait? Governor, do you want to comment on ESG?
Well, this is also a very important topic. If we look at our economy, given heavy reliance on oil, so this is also a critical subject that banking sector and the financial sector is very strongly connected to the oil sector and the oil companies. And climate change and the future of the oil industry is affecting that relationship. And we're discussing this subject and preparing the financial sector and the banking community for the future. Because I think we have to be ready from physical risks and transitional risks, financial risks, all types of risks that might emanate from what's happening in the world regarding the climate change. Governance is also very critical. The pandemic further strengthened the importance of having proper governance at all types of institutions. The banking sector is no exception. In fact, it should lead the private sector in terms of proper governance, and therefore we continuously ensure that our banking community is well managed, proper governance is well established and institutionalized at all levels. Recently, we introduced independent board members as part of the board of directors on a gradual manner that will reach up to 4 members in 2022. Of course, gender equality, income equality, all these things come into play and of utmost importance. We at the Central Bank of Kuwait were very proud that the female community represent a higher percentage, in fact, than the male community. We are at 58% ladies that represent our staff at all levels, including managerial and executive level. So those elements are very critical and important, and the regulator and the Central Bank of Kuwait are keen of achieving those objectives, of course, in cooperation with the banking sector.
Okay. Mr. Al-Sager, do you want to comment also?
To add that ESG trends have been significantly growing in importance, especially during COVID times, as companies' embracement of ESG will lead to a faster and more sustainable recovery. The importance of ESG disclosure and transparency helps mainly in building public trust and helps all stakeholders making better decisions. We are seeing the growing importance of ESG practices and reporting in the form of three main development trends. Number one, growing demand for sustainable investment globally, with more investors focusing on ESG. Additionally, premium valuation and pricing are being paid for companies with strong ESG program and satisfactory reporting. For example, in all our recent bond issuance, our discussion with investors reflected their increased focus on ESG practices and disclosure, and almost every meeting, our ESG strategy was a key topic. For example, in 2020, ESG funds captured $51 billion in net money for investors compared to 21 billion the year before. And also, more than 30 trillion of sustainable assets are professionally managed globally. And I would say also, more recently, we have seen various initiatives and proposals by likes of the ESFS, the European System of Financial Supervision, and the IFRS Foundation, the International Financial Reporting Standard, all aiming to improve ESG transparency through standardized set of sustainable reporting standards. Very soon, all rating agencies will include ESG reporting and scoring into their rating criteria, creating framework where ESG practices can be direct impact on credit rating. As a relatively underdeveloped concept in emerging markets, I would say that the importance of ESG practices and disclosure should be collaborated effort between industry leaders with regulators and government agencies to support and promote ESG practices and disclosures. Especially in Kuwait, we have seen significant development taking place, as His Excellency the Governor just mentioned, and the CBK efforts in developing the framework in the banking sector. The recent appointment of independent board members in banks is a great example of these ongoing developments. We have also seen some initiatives introduced by Bursa Kuwait to promote sustainability reporting by listing companies and potential plan to establish an ESG index to further stimulate ESG disclosure. Well, as much as we feel we are on the right track, there is more to be done to accelerate the trend through more countrywide effort to prepare Kuwaiti companies to upcoming challenges and the regulation and reporting standard that are focused on ESG that are taking place globally at a very fast pace.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anyone else want to comment on this ESG question? Put your hand up if you do. George?
One point, only small point. Basically, governance and environmental issues in the ESG is definitely has been the focus in the last few years. I think more so after the COVID. I think the social element will become more prevalent going forward due to the COVID. In the region, there were some also green sukuk certificates issued by, for example, Saudi Electricity, 1.3 billion issued in 2020. So the region is moving in this direction. And again, most of the investors, according to some surveys, okay, at least 3/4 of the investors expect greater pressure on ECG and their strategy post-COVID. So overall, yes, this is gaining prevalence, and companies should adhere to going forward, more so towards the social element of the ESG.
Okay. Yes?
Yeah, just a small comment.
Please.
Yeah, just a small comment. In addition to what the colleague said, is that ESG was there as was said for a few years past, and it's becoming more important as time goes by, and especially because of the pandemic, as mentioned. The banking sector is actually moving towards actually rating their clients based on their ESG and their environmental sustainability. Therefore, this is becoming an index that people will measure the different institutions and organizations. So yes, has become important and more important in the last 1 year or so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me ask it. Given the importance of the oil industry in the GCC, are banks in this region at a relative disadvantage when they're being evaluated on ESG? George, you're shaking your head. Does that mean you're...
Mentioned it. I mean, the fact that the GCC countries, including Kuwait, is a hydrocarbon industry, basically disconnecting from oil is a little bit not as easy as possible to be very environmental friendly. But I'm sure we will try to, banks in this region will be able to, and companies will be able to tackle this.
Okay. Anyone else? Governor?
Well, I think this represents a good opportunity actually to adapt and move to a more environmentally friendly business lines, including the oil sector, but in a more safer and greener manner. So we should look at this challenge as an opportunity rather than a threat. The oil sector is improving, as well as the banking sector that will remain providing sources of funds for this critical sector should also adapt and change in order to mitigate risks currently and in the future. And I want to also mention another thing. Everything in the ESG is centered around the human being. Therefore, I think one of the initiatives from the Central Bank of Kuwait, as well as the banking sector here, we launched recently a campaign called the Diraya, which means be aware, that educate people and customers about their responsibilities and rights, increase awareness, enhance the customer protection in a more friendly, easy, simple ways that deliver the messages and, as I said, give an opportunity for the people to make informed decisions. So this is one of the efforts that also we're trying to develop in order to achieve our objectives.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on ESG? Okay, we'll move on. It's been suggested Kuwait needs a comprehensive development plan to diversify its economy and spur job growth. Do you agree? If so, what should such a plan include? Many believe Kuwaiti economic and demographic factors require robust private sector job growth. This will probably have to come from SMEs. How will these organizations be financed to power this growth? Governor?
Well, every, I think, country in the world need an advanced, adaptive dynamic development plan that takes into consideration future challenges and risks and change with what's happening worldwide. And Kuwait is no exception. In fact, we need indeed a very comprehensive plan that reform all the structural imbalances and remedy all the difficulties and challenges our economy faces, whether in the economic, fiscal, labor, structural, because even though we achieved monetary stability and financial stabilities, which are necessary but not sufficient for economic sustainability, and both monetary stability or financial stability definitely will be impacted if we don't take the necessary serious steps to reform and remedy our structural imbalances. So we need a comprehensive development plan that diversify our economy away from oil, that create jobs for nationals. We have to continue to spend on capital investments in order to attract both local and foreign investors, create a healthy, attractive business environment. All that must be taken into consideration in order to enhance our fiscal position, our economic sustainability, to ensure prosperity for everyone in the society, not only now but also in the future, and ensure that future generations also enjoy what we enjoyed in the past. So it's very critical that we have such a comprehensive development plan.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on development plans? Ali, I think you had some comments you wanted to make.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. As His Excellency said, I mean, this will require a holistic approach from talent building to legislations to financing and regulations, all working in concert. I think in that equation, clearly the banking sector is ahead of the other sectors. Now, Kuwait has a lot of room for more disruption and diversification by allowing the growth of the SMEs. However, the environment can be tweaked a little bit in order to become more conducive for business formation. I would like to say two things. I mean, George mentioned demographics and the composition of demographics. That alone is quite a force toward diversification and business formation. And the second is the fiscal pressure. Also, as His Excellency said, there will be more reliance on privatization. And along with that, also the need for regulation to include the national workforce into that process. Non-banks, we believe, I mean, as the only non-bank among you, can play a very serious role in that space. The banking system in Kuwait is relatively risk averse, and very understandably so. For as long as we have assurances on deposit remaining in effect, we're not likely to see a spur basically in risk taking. Because of the constraints on interest rates, it just doesn't pay to take risk, and there is nothing wrong with that. It is basically the structure of the banking sector in Kuwait. Well-capitalized non-banks, financial institutions, we can get into high-risk financing, such as equity, quasi-equity, and debt. For example, the private debt market in the developed markets have ballooned. They charge substantially high interest rates, almost like equity-like returns, and replaced basically Western banks in funding the private equity and the VC sectors, which is quite important in effect to drive basically diversification and growth. So also, tweaks, for example, the non-banks can be very helpful with the tougher fiscal conditions we see build up in receivables. I think factoring and securitization, if properly regulated, and I think we have some way to go, can play a role. Other examples would be mortgages that can kind of, if it is a little bit better regulated, once it's regulated, hopefully can fuel the housing industry and take away the pressure from the governments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on the subject? Hands? Mr. Al-Sager?
What my colleagues has mentioned, as you know, we need more diversification in our decisions. I mean, in our decisions in the future. There's nothing more else to be said.
Okay. All right, George?
I mean, we all agree that, I mean, definitely SMEs is very important for spurring growth and for creating employment. This is where you know, economies improve. Yes, if you look at the companies in Kuwait, in numbers, 85% of the 85%, more than 85% of the registered companies in Kuwait are considered SMEs with turnover of less than 2 million or FTEs of less than 20. There is something like a conundrum or a dilemma here. Kuwait, in one sense, boasts a rising startup scene supported by local corporates. However, and also in 2020, for example, Kuwait ranked the 4th amongst Middle East countries after UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia in startup funding. However, the total bank funding remains, okay, for SMEs less than 5%. There is room for growth, definitely. It goes without saying. And within the 2035 vision of diversification of the economy, SMEs, I mean, is a critical element. If you look at it in numbers, yes, we have lots of SMEs, okay, around 35,000 companies are considered SMEs. But the contribution of SMEs to non-oil GDP in Kuwait falls short compared to, for example, other GCC countries. While it only offers or contributes only 6% in Kuwait to non-oil GDP, in Saudi Arabia it's 33%, in Bahrain it's 35%, in UAE it's 80%. If you look at the Western world, in Europe is around circa 50%. Also the contribution of SMEs so far in Kuwait to total employment also falls short or is below par. Kuwait is only 23% compared to Saudi Arabia of 60%. So those numbers indicate that there is room, okay, for KSA, provided, as Ali said, the regulations are there. The dilemma I'm trying to allude to is basically, on one hand, the Kuwaiti entrepreneurship is there, but Kuwait ranking on the ease of doing business is not very impressive at all. Let's face it. So there is lots to be done in this front and on many fronts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Al-Majed, I think you had your hand up. Can't hear you.
One short comment is that I think plans, we have plans. I think the governor also has been part of so many plans with previously. I think what we need here, what we lack is the will. I think we every 3, 4, 5 years when we have like a situation like this with oil prices down, we come up with plans, but then it disappears within 2, 3 years. So what we're lacking is, I think, the will. The plans can be done, and I think we had 2, 3 plans before, and only his the late Mr. Sheikh Nasser Sabah Ahmed, who was heading also a committees to do a plan. But all these, Al-Harir city, and all of these is just goes up and goes down. I think the will. We need the will that everybody. This is a long-term plan. This is not like a very short one, and we have to look at the future of our children. So The problem is that we do it, and then after 1 year, 1 or 3 years, and just we forget about it.
I think it's possible that the multiple crises created by the pandemic will bring that will about.
Well, I don't want to get into politics, but if you see the proposals that's coming from all over the place here, doesn't reflect that. And the moment we start seeing the oil prices going back again, which we have seen like in the last 2 weeks, I think if it goes to a certain level, everybody will forget all these plans. That's my opinion, at least.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Anyone else on this subject? Please, Madam.
Yes. In comment to George, I mean, what he said, I think he hit the subject very well, which is to do with SMEs. They're not contributing enough to the GDP because the definition of SME as defined in Kuwait was not as per the definitions that will actually improve our GDP. So I think it's the details are in the devil. We have plans, as the governor said, and as Adel said. We need actually to revise them and to actually continue implementing them instead of, as they said, just start something and then stop because things are going fine. Not only that is the details of how SMEs will be defined and what are the SMEs that actually will contribute to the economy. So this is where I think it's lacking. There's a lot of plans, and there's the 2035 vision of the late Emir, which had a lot of components and pillars that will help the economy for sure. But it has to be revised. I mean, it's been a few years since it was put in place, but also it has not been implemented because of the changes that happened politically and otherwise.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, that's the last question. We've got a few minutes. Does anyone want to circle back on anything we've discussed that they missed and they want to add? No one. Governor, do you have anything you want to say in conclusion?
No, I just want to thank you for this informative event, and I thank all participants for their valuable contribution.